how customers receive it. Do you get what I mean?
Absolutely. Exactly. So that's the reason why an exercise like this is important, to question that bias, right? To question that perception. Okay? So, absolutely nothing wrong with coming up with a value proposition that you think is the right thing to do, right? But the problem is, like what he has identified, the problem is that could be filled and riddled with bias. So now is the time to actually question that, right? So design thinking helps us do that, okay? So to refine your value proposition. Now the key over here is to understand that nothing that you are looking at, nothing that you are doing is based on your view. Actually, your view should not play a part, right? So whose view? Whose view should be taken into account? That's why knowing your customers is important, right? It's got to be the customers, not your view. But your view is going to play a part. Okay? But you see, the thing about taking it from a very individualized perspective, the thing about taking it from your perspective, it, as I said, is riddled with bias. As a result, that thinking process becomes more linear. You've got to get out of that linear-based process and get into that more complex oriented approach, right? Which means to do that, to actually get out from being linear oriented, you need to become more human-centered oriented, right? And that is where design thinking becomes valuable, because it forces you to take the perspective of your customer, your potential customer, perspective of your possible market that is out there. Okay? So as a result, you've got to go through that iteration. Okay? If at the first instance it looks like it's not going to work, is that good or bad? It's good, right? It's good because it's going to make you question. Should you debunk it and throw it out of the window? No, you shouldn't. Look for other avenues, right? Sorry?
It helps you faster to develop more.
Absolutely, right? Which is why failing at this stage is important, right? Fail. Which is why, as I told you, ask those questions. What could potentially derail your idea? What could potentially kill that idea? So the more you are able to identify those, the clearer you become in terms of options, possibilities, and opportunities. Right? So that's the main reasoning behind idea generation and the reasoning behind looking at it from a design thinking point of view. So the first step is empathy. Right? One of the key things that design thinking promotes is empathy. Put yourself in the shoes of your potential. Right? It's not about you anymore. It's about the customer. It's about those people that you're trying to provide a solution. The people who are dealing with these challenges. The people who are dealing with this problem. Right? Because the eventual solution that you're coming up with is to deal with the problem. Okay? So, the more you are able to empathize, the more you are able to understand the key areas or the nitty-gritty of those problems that those individuals or that market is likely experiencing. Right? So, this is where you need to be clear who your users are. I think on my very first day or the second session that we had, I highlighted the importance of focusing on the market. Right? Focus. Identify who these people are. That's very important. You can't be serving everybody. Okay? And even if you have, there's always the possibility that there are markets that are going to overlap with each other. Right? It's always the possibility that you will overlap. who you want to target. Remember, as much as we want to run with this plan, as much as we want to explore many possibilities that are there, at the initial phase, you do not have that plan. You do not have those resources to make it one, right? And this is the reason why you need to be very clear. Tomorrow, when we go into the areas of marketing opportunities, then there is a process that you can eventually decide how do you want to narrow those numbers down, right? So the challenge is this. First and foremost, you need to have a market that you can deal with, right? That you can eventually deliver that value. On the other hand, you've got to keep it narrow, but on the other hand, how narrow should it be? Because if it's too narrow, then you may not be able to grow, right? If it's too broad, you will not be able to deliver. So finding that sweet spot is always going to be one of the biggest challenges that you're going to do, right? So this is the reason why you need to brainstorm that. You can do most of that tomorrow, okay? Once you are clear in terms of the needs, the wants, or whatever requirements that are there, then you need to now be very, very clear in terms of what they are looking out for. What is it that they want? Not based on what you think that they want, right? You've got to understand as much as possible, you've got to understand what that market is looking out for. You cannot get to this stage unless you are able to understand that market, understand, right? So let's pause here for a while. What kind of steps would you take to try to figure out what the market is looking for? Where would you get all this information from? Okay, you could possibly do a survey. The problem with survey is again timeline, resourcing, and the type of people that you want to reach out to. Companies can do it, right? In fact, most companies that I know that I've worked with have never done a survey in their life. Y'all know that? You know, they don't do surveys. They outsource it to marketing research companies, right? They get these companies to do it for them because they've got that specialization. Okay, nothing wrong with surveys. I'm not saying anything is wrong with the survey, but you have an option today. Sorry, go ahead. Too soon though. Yeah, it's too soon to do product testing because you don't know exactly what that product is going to look like. In fact, you probably know it at the end of that process. Right? So at this stage, actually, you don't know how it's going to look like, and actually, you shouldn't know what it's going to look like. You may have an idea in terms of what that service may look like. You may have an idea in terms of what the product may look like, but actually, you don't know yet. Because you know why? You have not gone through that process yet to refine that idea that eventually becomes a viable product, feasible and viable. Right? So, you can research on this in terms of social media. Right? You guys have an opportunity today that many didn't have years ago. That's your social media platform. Looking out for information out there may not be a bad idea. Right? Throwing some ideas out there and see how people are responding to it may not be a bad idea without giving in too much of what you want to do. Right? So, those are options that you have. Like I said, nothing wrong with the survey. Okay, if you can run the survey, run that survey. Okay, if you can do a focus group, do a focus, which is the least expensive way to do it, right? Which is focus group. But you've got to identify those people who represent that market that you're looking at, right? So define it. So you've got to be very clear in terms of the POV of your customer. POV is the point of view of the market or the target market or the people who represent that target market. Once you are clear on that, this is what I would want you to do today. The third step. Brainstorm, come up with as many solutions as you can. Right? To do this means never shut someone up. Okay? No matter what that person says, there is always a possibility. Right? Remember, what you think, people always use these two words, common sense. Yes? We are all very fond of doing this. That's common sense. Shouldn't have done it. Right? We are very good at doing that, aren't we? Aren't we? Yeah. So let me give you an advice. Sense is not as common as you think. Right? What may be common sense to you may be nonsense to me. Okay? But it is still your sense. I need to understand where that is coming from. And that's important. Right? So even if it sounds senseless to me, I must still find out what prompted you to come up with that. Which is why I've always believed never ask a question, why? Right? Think about it. If you ask a question, why, the almost immediate response is going to become defensive. It will be defensive reason. You want to learn, you want to create new ideas, you want to come up with solutions that you may not even have thought about, then never ask why. Why almost immediately makes you do or puts you in a situation to justify not explaining what. Okay? The key question that you need to ask is why. Right? So what prompted that person to give that idea? What led to that person to come up with that idea? Right? What factors did that person take into account? So the minute we ask what, our brain shifts in terms of the way it answers. Right? And that's psychology, human psychology in terms of the way our brain operates. Okay? So, come up with as many solutions as possible. Okay? But you cannot simply sit with five and say, okay, what do we do next? Refine it. Sometimes you may find that 3 people solution could end up being integrated to one that an individual would have never been able to think on his own. Okay? So this is where find a way to bring this together, and once you have that idea, then come up with a prototype. Right? A prototype doesn't have to be a product. A prototype can still be a concept. There are 2 types of prototyping or prototyping out there. One is conceptual and the other one is an actual product. But if you are creating an app, you can come up with a concept of that app. If you're creating a product, today you can easily come up with that concept of that product. Why? Because technology allows you. Right? So the people that you have reached out to earlier in order to collect those information, those are the same people that you may want to use for your final phase. Test that concept. Right? Remember, you're testing concept. So, because again, you will not be able to come up with an actual product at this stage. Right? Like I said, unless you have an ad-based approach, you can come up with a concept of that. Right? If it's a product, again, keep it conceptual. So that's the whole process when it comes to design. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Anything you want to clarify on this? Seriously, no question?
Can you do
Oh, sorry.
okay, that's for instance, like, if I start up a business online, can I do like a free 1-month subscription so that it is receive the like different
If you're testing, yes, but you could keep that market very narrow. because you do not want to give away too much, right? And there's always this other problem. You know, again, different people have got different view. I'm not saying I'm right, but I have a problem when it comes to freebies. Okay? Because you're not really getting the people that you should be getting. Right? People don't mind freebies because what's my risk? Right? And I'll probably do it. But the minute I charge $1 more, sorry, not interested. Right? Because why? You could have attracted the people that were not part of your market, which means they don't mind being tested. So if you want to do that in terms of test, if you want to get them to test your subscription, then make sure first and foremost that those individuals are samples of the actual market you're looking for, which means personal expectation. So just open it up. Empathizing, first and foremost, before I define my market, before I actually create the point of view. The aspect of defining is the point of view of the people in the market. Right? But who do I know? But how do I know who they are? To understand who they are, I need to put myself in their shoes first. And that's where empathy comes in. Right? So the initial phase of empathizing is taking myself out of the situation I'm in right now. Because right now, all of us in this room have an idea, and our idea is based on what we think is likely to work. Right? Not to a point where it is necessarily aligned with the actual people that you're trying to serve. Right? So which is why now you have an idea, like I said, nothing wrong with that idea, but now you need to put yourself in the shoes of that group of people that you're trying to attract and try to now understand them. Right? So there are pains that they are likely to be facing. Pain means the problem that they are facing. And there is a solution for the problem that they are looking out for. Right? So first I need to understand the pain. Okay? Then only I can understand their point of view. And that's why you start with understanding the problem before you decide what they are looking at in terms of. That's the difference. Right? Mind you, this is not a linear process. Although it is put like a linear process, actually it's not a linear process. The minute I go into prototype, I may go back to redefining the point of view again. Because with that prototype, for example, now my ability to empathize increases. Because now I'm putting it back into them, trying to understand them. Right? So that's why it's an iterative process. Sorry, did that answer your question? Any other question?
What if you're really passionate about your idea and business, but you can't really seem to find people to kind of relate to it? Would you rather suggest that maybe you do that, or would you do something like that?
Fair. We are all passionate about many things. Yes? We are passionate about trying to do many things. But not all of them will translate into it. So if you're unable to identify someone or enough number of people out there who share a similar problem with you, then it may not be a passion that is shared by others. It could end up being too narrow. So at that point in time, pitch that idea. Right? Let me give an example. When do you think the first high density TV came up? Because it was driven by technology, it was driven by innovation, it was driven by passion, it was driven by the person's belief. So when do you think it came up? The first high density TV.
60s.
It came up in the early 70s. Did it work? Do you think it worked?
Not completely.
The entire business had to be shut down. The company actually went bankrupt. It was a British company that actually went bankrupt. Can't think of that company. It went bankrupt because that person, the company who came up with it, they strongly believe that's the next phase for entertainment. Were they wrong? No, they were absolutely not wrong. But the timing was wrong. Right? The timing was wrong because why? Infrastructure wasn't there yet. Right? And the cost of actually producing those TVs were way too high. So they actually eventually had to teach them that. The company that made HD TV very popular was actually ABC and Panasonic. Right? And they launched that first HD TV in the late 80s. How much was that TV? You all know? They launched it at $30,000. An HD TV initially was $25,000, $30,000. The cheapest you could get, it's considered at the lower rate, was about $15,000. Yeah, back then. Right? So you see, they went ahead with it because they had a market that was rich enough to purchase these TVs, and they knew that eventually it will go through that process and become cheaper. But they had the first entry to the market. So my point is, there are enough examples to show that people may have good ideas, but perhaps those ideas, market is not ready for it yet. Right? So sometimes you may be too ahead of market. So test it. If the market is not there, don't push it. Right? Keep your eye open to the market. Maybe at some point it could start showing signs of that. Yeah? Answers your question? Any other questions? No? Okay, so the key over here is understand your market. Very, very important. Okay? At the end of the day, you're not serving your needs, you're not serving your wants, nor are you serving your requirements, or what you believe are the needs, wants, and requirements. Not about your belief, it's about the market. Can't do this alone. It's got to be a collaborative effort. Right? So even if you're an entrepreneur, an individual entrepreneur, like I said, you still need to talk to people. You still need to throw that ideas to people. You need to get people to question your ideas. You need people to offer you other options, other viewpoints. And that's what collaboration is all about. So when we talk about collaborative approach, doesn't mean that you must have a partner. Right? Trust me, sometimes having a partner is the biggest bloody thing. Okay? It's the truth. You ask many entrepreneurs, they'll tell you. One of the main reasons why many entrepreneurship ideas fail is actually because of partners. Right? So sometimes it's good to do it alone. Okay? But like I said, there is no right or wrong answer over here. But it's got to be elaborate. You've got to experiment. Without experimentation, you can never refine. Right? So all this advice that is being given can be done without spending too much or expending too much of your limited financial resources. Okay? So, in that respect, this is what I want you to do. Answer this question as a group. If you have 3 ideas, answer the question for all 3 ideas. If you have 1, answer the question. Fair enough? Those of you who still want to, I know it is very unfair to all of you on the basis that I put you in a group and only think of 1 idea. I know personally you have your own ideas as well. If that is not going to be part of the team decision, doesn't mean you don't work on it. Work on it on your own. Fair enough? Is that okay? Yep. So let's take the next 20 minutes or so, work on this. How was your weekend?
Good. Nice. It was
down to Sentosa on your own, but somehow I think you all didn't bump into each other. That's closer to the hotel, right? Rasa Sayang? Shangri-La. I think it was Tanjung Mishal, near the lagoon, right?
Yeah. So we're not doing your idea. You don't want to do that one anymore for this project. Why do you think we wouldn't get an A?
I didn't say that. That's not what I said. I said I don't care which one we do.
Oh.
Whichever one is going to give us an A.
I don't think it matters which the idea is. I think it's more.
What?
I don't think it matters which the idea is.
Kind of does, because you got to remember, like, we're going to be graded off of all of this shit along with the prospect of money. You know what I'm saying? So it kind of does. It's not like, oh, we can fucking have a sandwich shop. Even if the sandwich shop makes $1 million, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean, like in between our two ideas.
Say that again?
What was your idea?
What I was thinking, it's more directed for like the Caribbean because there's an issue where during times of celebration, there's danger for conflicts and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I was thinking of some sort of protection, whether it be over the air or something, just to protect the air.
oh.
Because I feel like that's a very niche category.
Yeah.
A lot of people really take that into consideration. But
Who
it was
would,
just a very vague idea.
who would be like the, from your perspective, who would be the buyers? Is that the government or the people?
So people that have more interest in the well-being of their animals. So a lot of people express, like every single time, like New Year and Independence in my country, there's always like this concern that parents have when it comes to the celebration. Because no one cares about their fellow animals.
Yeah.
So I just started to think of that because
I don't think that'd be bad. Like, I think that could definitely be like a government sale type of thing, like selling directly to the government. You know?
I think the issue with that is in Trinidad, we actually, there's like a certain rule that you're really not supposed to be like doing fireworks on your own. But because the country is the way it is, like people don't really care. So, like technically speaking, the government would not support it because legally it's against the law.
Yeah, to do fireworks. Okay.
Because like they recently changed it because usually you could be on your own fireworks, but with the new government they changed the laws to only certain times of the year and certain times of the year like burst of fireworks.
Okay.
But I mean potentially we could market it towards the government, but I think if we then do that would kind of shift
The purpose of it?
not even the purpose, but I think he mentioned something that like entrepreneurs don't really go the route of getting money.
We may have, but in the U.S., they do that. In the U.S., there are companies that specifically build shit for the military.
Oh, that's true.
Government contracting, bro. It's a fucking. I know because I've been to DC before and like not been inside the convention, but been in and around these conventions and speaking to people who are going in there who like have fucking built shit that some of us would not have fucking really seen. You know what I'm saying? And they're going in there and selling to other governments or the U.S. government. So, but he would probably have a problem if we try to sell towards the government. Like whatever idea we come up, I'm sure if we try to sell to the government, I think it also would have to work here in Singapore. The reason I'm saying that is because a lot of us have brought up ideas that would work in America, and he shut it down.
I mean, like his whole thing is he shoots down the idea to make it big.
No, I don't disagree with that, but his understanding is of Singapore. So like, if we can make something that also applies to Singapore and applies to America, it's like, you know what I'm saying?
I think that would be very difficult because the way in which a country works is totally different. So like,
I mean, he himself said his startups here, just forget about it. So.
I guess.
I mean,